So there's two types of copyrights. There's the copyright for the composition, which is when an artist writes a song, lyrics, music, that is the underlying composition of a song. So that's one copyright. Another copyright is the actual recording. So when you go in the studio and record the song that you wrote, that is the recording. So those are the two copyrights. There's two different ways that those two copyrights can be exploited generally. And I think of it as performance can be one way and sale can be one way. And when I say performance, I mean the end user just passively listening to music. If you're in a bar or a restaurant, in your bedroom, wherever, and somebody's playing music for you over the airwaves or over any kind of device like that, that is a performance. A sale is if you go on the computer, buy your music through Apple Music, go on a site where you're a subscribing member, that's a sale. So we have a composition, we have a recording, we have a performance, and a sale. If you as an artist sign up for a performing rights organization, what they do is that they do surveys of all the songs played over radio, all the songs played on Pandora, wherever, and they do a calculation and they pay out the publishers, the songwriters. And so that is how the performance of a composition gets paid out. And again, an artist would go to a place like ASCAP or BMI to sign up as a songwriter and a publisher to ensure that they would be able to collect those monies. A sale of a composition, how that would play out is if you have a manufacturer records, the composition is on the sound recording. So every time you make a copy of a record, that is what is called as a mechanical royalty, because you sign up for a mechanical licensing collective. They are an organization that issues blanket licenses to all of the different DSPs. And so when the DSPs play music, when music is played over those DSPs, every time that happens, a copy is made in the ether. And so composers collect mechanical royalties. Today, the rate for mechanical royalty is 12.4 cents per copy. And so that is a recent increase from the 9.1 cents that was before. And in addition to that, the latest increase is now tied to the consumer price index, which means in the future going forward, each time there's a raise in inflation, the mechanical royalty rate will go up, which has not happened before. So now we're gonna go to the recording copyright. And if we go to think about what a performance of a recording copyright gets you as an artist, now we're talking about recording artists, not composers. What that performance gets you is a something that's actually pretty new, because as Joey was saying before, for radio, for the longest time, royalties were only paid to composers. And so in 1995 or 1998, they changed the law so that recording artists also get a performance royalty, but only on digital platforms. When there is a performance of a sound recording now over digital platforms, the recording artist gets a royalty for that. If you're an independent artist and you don't have a record label, maybe you just go to a digital distributor. And so when you make sales through a digital distributor, what happens is the income comes through them, they take their percentage, whatever that is, and they forward the rest onto you. So that, in a sense, is your royalty as an independent artist. If you are on a record label, you've negotiated a recording contract, and so what you are paid as a royalty for the sale of a recording is dictated by your recording agreement. And so how a lot of recording agreements are structured is that the artist, as an artist, you get paid in advance upfront. And so as the sales of your recordings happen, those sales are recouped against the advance that you were given initially. Yes, if you're on a label, you don't actually get a royalty from sales of recording until you meet that advance figure. For a composition that is performed, again, you go to ASCAP BMI to sign up as a songwriter and a publisher to get those monies. For a mechanical royalty, and again, that is the sale of a composition. You sign up for the Mechanical Licensing Collective, and they handle the royalties for the DSP blanket license in the US. But any other mechanical royalties you get through Harry Fox or Music Reports Incorporated, the distribution of a sound recording takes place through this company called Sound Exchange. And you could sign up either as or both. You could sign up as a label. There's like a label portion, and then there's a recording artist portion. And so the performance of a sound recording you get through Sound Exchange. And then the last sort of quadrant is the sale of a recording. And you could either get that through your digital distributor or your record label via your recording agreement. I think it depends what kind of artist you are and what your goals are. I think so if you go from like the biggest label out there, so I think the benefit in that scenario is that you are gonna have a partner hopefully who's gonna invest a lot of money into brand awareness and to get your name sort of to a place where it opens up doors for like a larger fan base. In terms of maybe an artist who's not as ambitious, it would be, a partner who is reliable, more of like an artistic partner. In terms of the actual deals themselves, I look at it in different ways. Like I look at, so what's the money like? When does the contract end? And how the contract is moved forward. Those are, to me, the three basic questions. And then there's like another question of like how the terms are defined, which is also important, which also gives meaning to those three larger questions. So in terms of money, obviously more is better, but in some circumstances, I've had clients where we've put our heads together and have decided to take less money. In this scenario where they were offered a in perpetuity deal, which is where the label owns the masters. And so one particular client I had didn't want that. And so we put our heads together and went back to the label and was like, we'll actually take less money to enter into a licensing deal. And they went with it. So, that's one question. And then there's a question of options. Some record contracts are longer. I typically like to have a shorter number of albums involved. That way, if the partnership isn't working out, you could get out of it earlier. And then there's a question of how the contract moves forward. So I feel like a lot of artists don't understand that really a recording agreement is all the options are really with the record label. So if you have a 4 or 5 record deal, what happens is that, it seems like security, but really it's not, because the record company has the option after each album to drop you. And so it really is, for the artist, it is a 1-by-1 album deal. For the record label, they have the power to keep you locked in for longer periods of time. So that's why I say that shorter album periods are better, but then also it depends on how the power the record companies have to define what is an album they can accept. And so the way that is defined in the contract will be the difference between artists who get stuck between album 1 and 2 because the record label doesn't accept their delivered album, and an artist that can more easily move through the contract periods and get out of their contract eventually. So another thing I just remembered is there's a term called cross-collateralization, which it sounds bad, just like in perpetuity, and it usually is. So what that means is that, so if you have a recording contract and there's like 5 albums, if album 1 does really well and like 2 and 3 are a bomb, and so you're like 70,000 in the hole or something, then and the next one does like 200,000. So instead of making 200,000, it's like 200 minus 70. That's the concept. which you're not going to really get stricken out of most recording contracts, but where it's a little egregious is when there's multiple recording contracts and they put a cross collateralization clause in there so that the second contract can be reached by the deficits of the earlier contract. And if it's a publishing deal, which has nothing to do with the master, then there's cross collateralization between the recording agreement and the publishing agreement, which is definitely those last two agreements. So if you do a publishing designee, that's doing business as, so more than likely you will have to register that with whatever state you reside.
So yeah, then would there be an LLC behind this somewhere? It has to be some kind of business that's registered with the state?
No, it doesn't have to be.
Not even use it, but it's you as an artist, does that eventually come up either, or you're just getting paid as an individual entity?
So there is a time, there might be a time where you as an artist might want to create a business entity. It's called a loan out corporation, and so a lot of artists do that. Enter into the recording deal as an LLC to have like an extra layer of liability protection. But you don't have to do that for the publisher.
Do you have to use a DBA, or can you just use your own self-proprietary?
I think you could use your name. So if you want to record a cover, you have to do what is known as a compulsory license. So you just go, it's literally a form you have to fill out and to send to the composer, the original song, saying that you intend to do this cover. And there is a nominal royalty that goes along with that, but it's a fairly straightforward process. There's the composer, the songwriter, and then there's the owner of the recording, which a lot of times is a record label. So if you want to clear a sample, you have to find, which is the hardest part actually, you have to find the songwriter. And I've done this a number of times and I hate it, but somehow you find the songwriter, you send them an email, you kind of gauge how expensive it would be to clear the sample. You do a song and dance and you get to a number and hopefully clear that side of the sample. And then for the recording, you either have to find, if it's an independent artist, the recording artist, or in most cases it's a label. And that's even trickier because it's like, if it's a big label, they've been sold and transferred so many times that you have to send sometimes 10, 15 emails. But when you finally get to the right person, it's the same song and dance. You've come to a number, but in most cases, if you settle with one number for one, then you have to settle for the same number for the other. I'll speak on the recording side. So, I think over the years, the contracts have gotten a lot better. I haven't seen one of the old school sort of big label recording contracts in a while, and those were very cumbersome to get through, and a lot of legalese and different things that just made it expensive for the client to have a lawyer look at. Now I think the contracts are a lot better in terms of it's in a way simpler. It's a 50-50 split in most cases. More contracts are exclusive licensing deals, which are better than the in perpetuity deals. So I think there's progress has been made, but I think contracts could still be written better. And it stands out when I get a recording contract that kind of leads in that direction. I think it's a process and hopefully it gets better over time. So one thing I've seen in those contracts is certain labels, the bigger indies will build in more like on the expense side, or they'll build in like some kind of administrative fee, which is almost like makes it then not the 50-50 split. So I think probably see more of that different ways through adding more expenses to the mix and maybe like having some sort of a fee where it becomes less of a 50-50 split. I would say usually when you're presented, it doesn't happen that you're just presented a contract. Usually what happens is there are some preliminary discussions. Maybe you're presented with a deal memo, which is like a 1 or 2 page summation of what the long form agreement would be. So I think that's probably a good point when you have those initial conversations and when you're presented with the deal memo to reach out. I would talk to a bunch of lawyers. I know I could speak for myself. I don't usually charge for initial consultation. And probably a lot of lawyers, you can find a lot of lawyers that don't. So I think, if you find lawyers that want to charge you for that initial consultation, feel free to sort of like shop around. But that's the advice I would give is just when the first inkling of any kind of business contract being presented to you, you don't have to wait until you have the contract in hand. It's nice to talk to someone before then. The better clause is technically satisfactory. But then there's another clause that says commercially satisfactory. So commercially satisfactory to me is very ambiguous. It's not really clear what that means. Like one's definition of what is commercially satisfactory can differ widely from other people. And so I think in a lot of instances where a label chooses not to release what is delivered to them by the artist, they lean on the commercially satisfactory language. And so I think to the extent that you could put in technically satisfactory, which just means that it was recorded by somebody very competent and they did all of the correct things that a person of their stature would do in a studio, that would tend to satisfy that requirement. There are some other things in a contract that I would shoot for in terms of making sure that scenario doesn't play out. One thing you could also put in is a key man clause, because in a lot of recording contracts, the reason the artist is sought after by the label is they have a relationship within that record company. And a lot of times record companies get sold, transferred, and then the person who really championed that band in the recording company is no longer there. So the artist will fall through the cracks. So I think a key man clause in addition to the technically satisfactory might be a couple of things that will help that scenario. One more thing as far as the minimum commitment, which I've also seen it limited by the number of songs you deliver in a publishing deal, and then also the length of those songs. So, I've been in a situation where I've looked at those contracts and I knew that my client did not release songs of the length that was required. So obviously that's something you want to look at very closely.